Access to reliable, quality information should be a right of anybody, wherever they live.
Today, the journalism industry faces many challenges.
Readership has become more fragmented, and in many ways, the experience of journalism has become more fragmented.
How can news organizations remain relevant in the digital age?
The traditional world of news media is shifting ever more quickly.
70% of people can't distinguish between a real story and fake news.
Disinformation is on the rise. Trust in media is falling. Journalists are having to do more with less.
A lot of these solutions will come from the journalism industry and the tech industry working together.
So we're announcing the Google News Initiative, our effort to enable journalism to thrive in a digital age. It will enable new models for sustainable journalism, elevate quality journalism, and ensure that technology allows journalists to do their jobs even better.
The solutions to the challenges that the industry is facing has to come from the right mix of journalism and technology.
I'm really optimistic about the future of journalism. We just need to find the best ways for it to be able to flourish.
I think there will always be a hunger for high-quality journalism.
I think it's never been more important for us to work together.
And it's only through collaboration that we can do journalism in new and powerful ways. Because when journalism succeeds, we all do better.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching around the world. Welcome to this Google News Initiative Innovation Forum. We are live. We have an audience. Hello, audience. That's good for a Friday afternoon. My name is Matt Cook and I'm your host over the next hour. What is the Innovation Forum, I hear you ask? Well, this is the first time we've done this. We don't quite know yet, but we might know more in 60 minutes. We do have a plan. We have 5 international speakers who are here to give us their perspective on a topic close to them. What have they learned about innovation in journalism over the last year, and perhaps what is to come in 2019. So a full agenda for everyone here in London and all of you watching on the live stream too. But first, let's take a look at a few announcements we're happy to make today. Through the Google News Initiative, we've trained 140,000 journalists in person over the last few years. But we know there's much more we can do online too. So we've overhauled our online training centre, g.co/news training. And now you'll be able to find this in many more languages, 16 in fact. And on there you'll see 55 lessons, which go through a range of different topics. When it comes to other forms of visual journalism and data journalism, there's one global reference point you should also be aware of, and many are already. It's the Data Journalism Handbook. It's a resource that's been available online since 2011. It was created by data journalists around the world. In fact, the first Data Journalism Handbook was thought of at an event in London back in 2011. So it's perhaps fitting that at an event in London in 2018 that we can announce today the second Data Journalism Handbook, which has been created by data journalists from around the world in association with the Google News Initiative and led by the European Journalism Centre. So today, right now, you can go on to datajournalismhandbook.org and find the very latest advice and tips from data journalists around the world. You can take a look there, and there we see the book. The real book is coming in the new year, but right now you can find the PDF online. Other forms of visual storytelling are also being talked about today. Let's take a look at this. How else can we think about visualizing our stories? And this is the new tool we want to talk about, Google Earth Studio. Earth Studio is an animation tool for Google Earth satellite and 3D imagery. Built from the ground up, based on industry practices. It's enabling journalists to create greater camera control and create beautiful animations. You're actually looking now at the user interface, and we're happy to say that from today, many of you around the world will be able to access this at g.co/earthstudio. So let's take a look now at what journalists can access when they use this tool for the first time.
センターから打ち上げられます。このロケット
The
は
U.S. women's national team will be celebrating their record-setting third Women's World Cup trophy in the 5 boroughs, with the ticker tape parade later today in Lower Manhattan.
So there you go, the brand new Google Earth Studio. A big thank you to the Earth Studio team for revealing this tool today, and you can take a look for yourself and sign up at g.co/earthstudio. Now, in June, we made a public set of principles that guide how our company thinks about the development of AI. To build a stronger base for how AI can benefit the news industry, the Google News Initiative and the London School of Economics and Political Science is collaborating to launch Journalism AI. The new initiative will focus on research and training for newsrooms. It'll launch a global survey about how media is currently using this technology. Stay tuned for much more about Journalism AI in 2019 and how we'll be continuing to collaborate with newsrooms around the world. So, those are all our announcements. You can find much more about the work of the Google News Initiative at g.co/newsinitiative, and we'll be talking much more about all of these announcements across social. But now, it's time to hear from our 5 international speakers. They've flown from Brazil, the United States, they've got the tube from Oxford Circus just down the corner, but they are here to give their perspectives on a whole range of topics. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first one. Please welcome to the stage Lisa Gibbs from the Associated Press.
Is this the journalist of the future? Artificial intelligence used to exist only in the world of science fiction. Now, journalism organizations like mine are increasingly using terms like machine learning, natural language processing, and algorithms to talk about how we report, produce, and distribute the news. AI has been described as the next era of computing. In the broadest sense, AI is a system that mimics human intelligence. It can be trained to recognize faces and objects, to understand languages, and to solve problems. An algorithm can perform millions of computations very quickly, or it can be used to create a single template for a news story, which can be replicated thousands of times from different data. When it comes to news, we are in the very early stages of figuring out how to apply this technology to what journalists do. At the Associated Press, we use automation and AI primarily to eliminate routine work, like video transcription, so that our journalists can concentrate on doing the creative and curious work that informs the world and holds our world leaders accountable. By the end of next year, the Associated Press will be creating around 40,000 stories using automated templates, primarily in business news and sports. We are transcribing video in real time. We're exploring how image recognition software can help us filter out graphic content from our image feeds, or help us identify athletes in sports photos. Of course, AP is only one of many news organizations that are experimenting and learning with this technology. The broadcaster NHK in Tokyo created anime news readers, which can sign news for the deaf and hearing impaired, and co-anchor the 11 o'clock news. The news agency STT in Finland is translating news into English and Swedish in seconds. For the World Cup, Fox Sports allowed their app users to create custom highlight videos thanks to AI. Increasingly, journalists are using algorithms to help our journalists find news and break news faster. Investigative reporters can sort through data much faster than ever before. And AI-based systems are helping us sift through all the thousands of tweets and posts on social media and alert our editors when they show breaking news. We must talk about fake news, of course. Bad actors are increasingly using AI technology to create and spread misinformation. Journalists can and must arm themselves with the same technology to combat this. At AP, we're using algorithms and computer vision to build a tool called Verify that will allow our journalists to more quickly vet the images and video that people post on social media. This involves analyzing the metadata to tell us whether the source of the video is likely to be legitimate. It breaks the video down frame by frame and scans the web to tell us whether this video has shown up before, maybe in a different context, maybe showing something else altogether. And it does this all at very high speed. Using this tool will help us call out misinformation much faster, as well as make sure we're disseminating more trustworthy, verified content. In our 4 years of working with these technologies, we've learned a few important lessons. These technologies are powerful, but they require new skills, new workflows, and new ways of thinking in our newsrooms. They are only as good as the data that goes into them. In this example, an alert tool tweeted news of a very powerful earthquake, except for the fact that the quake happened in 1925. The bot only knows what is fed into it. Bad data, bad journalism. Guess what? That's true of human journalists as well. The difference here is that bias is inherent in data sets sometimes, maybe racial or gender biases, for example, can create new kinds of mistakes and magnify them 1,000-fold. That's why AP and many other news organizations are adamant about applying the same news values and principles to our work with AI as we have in our journalism through our history. And it's why we believe that the industry must work together to develop a common set of standards and best practices for AI in news that will ensure we hold true to those principles. And it's also why we believe that this is not the journalist of the future. It is a journalist assistant, and it can be a very good one. AI will augment, never replace, the work of the world's journalists. We do acknowledge that this is an optimistic view of AI in news. We're not blind to the challenges. As these technologies make it easier to trick both machines and humans, newsrooms must act now to understand this new era of computing and develop defenses against them. Trust in journalism is at stake. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Daniel Bramatti.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about the largest collaborative project involving journalism in the history of the Brazilian press. This is the Comprova project. And at the beginning of this year, the organization that I'm representing here, the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism, was invited to take part of a coalition to help to organize and coordinate a coalition of 24 news organizations to fight misinformation in Brazil. And this was like a danger zone to us, so we hesitate to say yes, but we did, and it was a good call. As you know, Brazil is right now a very polarized society, and all this polarization is transforming our social networks in a political battlefield. It's really hard to explain because I think you don't have polarization here, right? I heard that you live in a consensual society, but the invitation came from First Draft, from Claire Wardle, who is here with us today, and these are the partners of the coalition. You have here newspapers, you have TV stations, radio stations, web-based news organizations, and also news agencies. And the idea was to pool the resources of all these newsrooms to monitor monitor misleading content on social network, and also to use the power of amplification of these news organizations to spread the debunkings of this false content. So in the end of May, the journalists involved in the project met for the first time. And a lot of journalists, they were not familiar with content verification, so they had to be trained. And First Draft gave us the tools and methodology to do it. And in June, the project was officially launched. In August, we began to publish our content in August 6. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, a lot of news organizations were working together to check the content. So collaboration was working from day one. And we were very positively surprised by the engagement that this project generated between journalists. We use a WhatsApp group to communicate because we had to work remotely. And in 6 months, about 50 journalists, they exchanged more than 18,000 messages on this WhatsApp group, all related to the projects, all related to content verification. And also, I did a word count in these messages, and we exchanged more than 315,000 words. And that's more, in terms of text volume, it's more than any book of the Harry Potter saga. So what we learned, sometimes a shared purpose motivates more than the competition. Collaboration is horizontal, but you need a central coordination, of course. And the editor, the person in charge of this coordination, he must not act like a boss, but like a diplomat. Collaboration builds trust, and collaboration improves quality. We ended the project with 0 errors. And also for the future, one collaborative project opens a door to another one. So we are right now in Brazil discussing a new Comprova, a slightly different one, to begin in 2019. We also learned that verification is hard. Sometimes it took days to debunk just one piece of content that may be created in a matter of minutes. But the Comprova project managed to publish around 12 debunks per week, or 147 in total. We got more than 70,000 messages sent by our readers in our WhatsApp channel. And of course, our content had millions of views. But the question is, was it enough? Of course not. The impact of disinformation in the electoral campaign was huge. And when I think of the role of Comprova in the electoral process, this image comes to my mind. In September of this year, our National Museum in Rio was hit by a huge fire. And almost immediately, it was a Sunday night, and a lot of workers, museum workers and also researchers, they rushed to the scene, and some of them even entered the building and faced the flame to rescue some items. They knew they could not save the museum, but they did what they could, and they did what was right. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage Marie-Louise Timcke.
Hello, I'm very excited. My name is Marie-Louise Timcke. I'm a Berlin-based data journalist working in the interactive team of the Funke Media Group. And I'm going to talk about, or to share some of my thoughts on the future of data journalism. So in 2012, Simon Rogers gave a TED Talk about how data journalism is the new punk, because everyone could do it. And working with data in the newsroom to find new stories wasn't very widespread at that time. So journalists more like became data journalists by accident. They slided into using data for their stories, while still being a video journalist or still working shifts at the news desk. And this is something that has changed, because where these self-made data journalists took their first baby steps, their first shaky steps a few years ago, there are now established teams of professional specialists working together on data-driven stories. There are journalists working with designers, with developers, with data scientists, to handcraft beautiful infographics, but also to investigate large amounts of data with statistical methods journalists mostly don't use. And there are newcomers like me who are trained to become a data journalist. So I started studying statistics and journalism knowing that I want to become a data journalist. So as a data journalist, actually, when I am asked about the future of something, I always tend to look at the past, because I know that I have to check the past data to fit a prediction model. So what I'm going to share with you now are some of the most important things I learned about data journalism looking back the past years. And the most important thing for me is that data journalism is journalism. Data journalists are still primarily journalists. We differ in our methods, but we don't have any other topics or motives or ethics. So we're still journalists, and we're working on the news, working journalistic. But data journalism is data-driven and it's technology-driven. We're not using data as one of our sources, we use it as our main source. We even try to find a whole new story we didn't think about before in a data set. And we're also technology-driven because we try to make use of new technologies that are very new or haven't been used in journalism before, and try to find a way to use this for making better journalism. One example from my team before I went there, from the Berliner Morgenpost, is this project where the team used 3D models to show how the Berlin skyline will change in the future. The third thing I like to share with you is that data journalism has a very wide range. For example, this kind of simple bar chart visualizing crime statistics is data journalism, as well as this very known example of a month-long investigation where there are no visuals at all. So there's a very, very big there can be a very big difference in the output of data journalism teams, in the team composition, so what people are working there and what projects they are working on. It's a very wide range. Another thing that I really like about data journalism is that we're really, really transparent. So transparency of sources is like the cornerstone of journalism, but it's often neglected because of different reasons. And in data journalism, because of the deep connection we have to the scientific and the open source community, we are often more conscious for the need of transparency. And this starts by listing our sources, linking our sources, making the data set available to download it, but also publishing making-ofs, or like in this example, I published my whole programming code with explanations to explain the reader how I did my measurements and how I visualized this, or we visualized this. This is an example of the steep fall the party SPD in Germany took, and we sonificated it. The next thing that we really see in our comment sections, and we see in the metrics, is that data journalism is the reader's darling. They really love our stories. Whether it's the fancy visualization of something, or the new perspective on a current topic, or just the possibility to break down a complex topic right in front of your door. Readers really, really like it, and I think that data journalism can be, setting up a data journalism team can be one of the most successful image campaigns to retain both readers and advertisers. Okay, so this is what the past years showed me about data journalism, what I learned from being a data journalist the past years. And now I would like to share with you some learnings, 4 learnings, to give you the number, we should apply in 2019 to make it even better. So the first thing is that I really would recommend to identify your team's concept, because neither reporters nor the editors know, or sometimes neither the reporters nor the editors really know what they want when they start doing data journalism. They just got into it because they saw that fancy data visualization, or they just heard the buzzword and said, oh yeah, I want to do that too. Or I want to try out that new technology, that's so cool. But they don't really know what they want to do. So you really have to think of the concept of the team. Do you want to reach a maximum number of people, or do you focus on long, engaging stories with a long engagement time of the reader? How visual do you want to be? How investigative? Because you can't have all, and you have to give your team time for a long investigation, but for small visuals, you don't have to give them such much time. So you really have to think about that, because developing a concept will guide the story, will guide the team, and will help you judge the success of the team and communicate its value to anyone who needs to be convinced. The next thing is collaborate. Collaborate both internally and externally. So collaboration is a very big motor for journalism, but for data journalism specifically too. And we can see that in big examples like the Panama Papers, which is a collaboration with people from other countries, but also in small collaborations. Like this is a project my team did on facial recognition. This is me with short hair. So we try to tell that story, how facial recognition works, and make it available to our readers to check themselves as just a simple facial recognition algorithm. And we collaborated with the whole team of the Berliner Morgenpost and the magazine to write text, to research, and also to check if the algorithm is very good or very bad at guessing how old we are. So this can be a good motor, and I think just like some of you, I think you just said that it's better to collaborate than just only thinking about how we can be better than the others and don't share anything with them. The next thing, unleash the potential of data journalism in local reporting. I think data journalism has a lot of potential in local reporting because there's such a granular data treasure hiding in the city's basement. You can't get on the national or international level because then they just sum it up and then you have that big number or just numbers, one sum for each state. But on the city level, and even if you even go smaller, you can find so many interesting data sets that really touch the reader's hearts and the needs, and you can really put a complex topic down, break it down to the front door. This is one of my favorite examples of my own team where we did that. This is noise pollution, the noise pollution data of Berlin. And you don't only see that, there's a lot of noise at the airport or at the big streets, but you can actually just type in your address and have a look at how noisy it is on the window of your bathroom in comparison to the window of your kitchen, for example. And the last point is hire the nerds and hire diverse. I think there's a big diversity going on in data journalism teams. We have young people that are really driven to data journalism. We have scientifically interested people that are driven to data journalism. Half of the teams in Germany are headed by women. And the age range, the experience, the background of the team members vary widely. So I think that diversity is a big motor on telling stories, on developing great journalism, data journalism as well. And I believe if you want to, when it comes to set up a data team, hire diverse, hire the nerds, and don't be afraid to hire the yet unexperienced new talents, because they have the greatest ideas. I have to say that because I'm young and unexperienced. Okay, so I think if we apply these 4 learnings, and I think that's not that hard, I see a really, really bright and multifaceted and diverse future for data journalism. What actually worries me more, if I think about after 2019, is the lack of data literacy in the normal newsroom. So the world is getting more and more data-driven. That's something I run on. The data journalism is driven by that. The world is getting more and more digital, more and more data-driven. And there are so many topics in the news that are data-driven as well. How can we, as journalists, explain or report on that if we don't know what a representative study has to look like? How can I report on how Facebook is influencing the election if I don't know what an algorithm is? And that's a big, big problem I see in every newsroom, that there's a big lack of data journalism, of data literacy, basic data literacy. And I think that this skill is something that every journalist should have and will need in the future. So please keep that in mind too. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage Dmitry Shishkin.
Hi all. It's a real pleasure to be here 10 days before I leave the BBC, so thanks. Really, really delighted to be sharing something which probably has been the most important project that my team and I have been doing in the last 2 years or so. The title is so everybody knows about famous 6 user needs that BBC has been applying like crazy across the world in the last 18 months or so. So I would like to unpack it a little bit, and I would like to actually explain to you how we did it and what it means to other newsrooms. And the disclaimer is going to be that I have been slapped on my wrist a lot of time by our marketing, comms, and audiences team. I don't really care. This is important. BBC is a public service organization. Whatever we come up with in terms of research, which is relevant to the global journalism, we need to give back. And this is my mantra, and I'm going to share it with you. This has been available publicly before. So 28 teams up until 18 months ago or so, up until 12 months ago. So all very different, all doing very different things across the world. My problem was that I'm digital editor for languages. I don't control what they output, but I control how they output and what they do and what they prioritize. So my problem was that at some point of time, languages stopped growing internationally because they have been really great 10, 15 years ago, and then suddenly competitors came in, and competitors overtook us, and they really have become better. So my job was to think with audiences, with other teams, with the product teams, to think about how else can we grow. And actually BBC Mundo, our largest and most successful team around the world, has led the way. So about 5 years ago, they decided that there is no way BBC Mundo, a team of 40 people, 50 people, can beat Latin American competition. So they needed to find a niche. And this was basically the mantra which we have been talking to people around languages, and we were saying, if you can explain why you exist in every single market around the world, then you have a chance to succeed. And we then we have been given the money by the government to launch 12 new teams around the world to address some of the news deficiency situation around the globe, and we have decided to start applying the 6 user needs model to the new teams, because actually it is easier to tell new people, new teams, how to do journalism in a different way rather than retrain the existing 28. But when we launched the 12 new teams, we basically said to them that do your editorial content, do your editorial morning meeting, do your commissioning and planning process according to this. So this is a much more beautified Google version of 6 user needs. I have to say, really beautiful colors and everything. But the gist stays the same. Basically, every person who wakes up and checks the news, they are likely to consume the headlines already with the local providers. The BBC probably with the exception of maybe 5 or 6 teams around the world, the BBC is not going to tell people anything new. I would argue even further, if you have a subscription to AP, to France Press, to Reuters in your newsroom, you already have access to international news. BBC has got to be delivering something different. And this is what we were saying. This is where it really becomes a really important thing. Our audiences team, this is not what BBC has come up with. This is what audiences told us they needed from news. So we went around the world and we spoke to people, real people, and we actually have formulated that strategy according to what we have been told. So actually we have been very carefully using the words that people have been using to us in our interviews, and they have said that these are 6 reasons why they consume news. And of course, Update Me is one of the reasons why they consume news. The trouble is, majority of newsrooms still think that Update Me is the most important thing. However, what we have shown, again, using data and numerically, what we have shown is that as soon as you start addressing other 5 user needs on a continuous basis, using the same, covering the same news agenda that you have on the day, the growth is coming. Because this is becoming your differentiator, and this is becoming what basically separates you from the rest of the market. And just very briefly, Update Me and Keep Me on, Update Me is what has happened, Keep Me on Trend, what do people talk about the event on social media. Inspire Me is about, tell me a story about an inspirational person who has gone through a particularly difficult time or experience and persevered. Divert Me is give me something different apart from Syria or something really hard news. I really want to be diverted into learning about something else. And 2 other user needs. One is Educate Me, explain to me. Don't tell me about another, say, incursion in Gaza, for example, but tell me and explain to me the process in the conflict in Q&A, for example. And give me perspective is about give me a story and tell me what people talk about this, but not on the social media level, but on the level of different perspectives from different experts and stuff. So the reason why I wanted to talk to this about today, because this is what unites 40 BBC languages around the world. They all serve completely different audiences, and they all serve completely different circumstances. I mean, you know, there are markets of want, and there are markets of need. There is Somalian market, and there is your Iranian market, where the BBC is banned, or Vietnamese, or Russian, or Latin American. All of them are quite different. But as soon as we have moved the team to divert their commissioning and planning process according to this user needs. I mean, yeah, sometimes when I fly around the world, you go to a newsroom and they see the whiteboard and they pitch the ideas, and you see that they suddenly don't pitch the idea just to say what they're going to cover. They actually say what user needs they're applying, and this basically kind of proved my point that my team and I have succeeded in terms of enforcing that new approach. And that is great, because that sometimes people think that this is just only about commissioning story, but no, because you can commission a story in a particular user need, but then your headline will still indicate a different user need and the people will not be interested. So the way you write your story and the way you pitch your story, I mean, it's great because sometimes you go to an editorial meeting and people will not stop until somebody formulates their headline. And some editors are becoming incredibly energetic about this. So they say, don't tell me about something is interesting, but tell me how you're going to pitch it to me. So what I'm going to show you, and I guess the reason why this is important is that this is about the schizophrenic output of some of our teams in the past. And I mean it in kind of in the most, in the kindest possible way here. So the graph basically shows you the number of items produced, red line, and the gray bars is basically the popularity of each user need. And you see that people have been producing a lot of Update Me stories, whereas actually Update Me story was the least popular category of that particular output. So we have been addressing this in the last 2 years. New teams, old teams alike. And I wanted to briefly go through the actual examples, and I wanted to use Mo Salah. So I'm not a Liverpool fan, but this is something which we have been using with BBC Arabic team at one of the away days. This is really powerful, actually. You get a bunch of editors in the room and say, give me 3 headlines for each user need about a particular story in 5 minutes. And they come back with this, you suddenly have 20 ideas or 30 ideas, and they're all very interesting and all very different. I have done it in Nairobi with Swahilis, I have done it with Arabic team. Recently my team and I have been doing it a lot. So Update Me story is Mo Salah winning something, or winning the best person, or the best footballer of the year, or some kind of different another award. Typical story, worth writing. Keep Me on Trend is about what kind of songs have Liverpool supporters created about Mo Salah. Still about him winning something because he can mention it in the headline, but the story is different. That's keeping on trend. What do people talk about this? Or that you can actually buy stuff with Mo Salah's face in it. Betting, Mo Salah's betting. That's typical keep me on trend type of story. Educate Me is about how Mo Salah goes fasting, still plays football at the same time. I didn't know that, but that is a really good indication. So instead of writing a story about Mo Salah winning something, because probably like 10,000 other news operators in the world will still write the same thing on the same day. So we will write something different, and we would not be afraid of actually leading our websites with a different story. Another Educate Me story is that what kind of things, how many times does he do yoga every day or every week or something like that? So that what kind of physical exercise routine he's sticking to. Give Me Perspective story would be a typical background piece on him funding, football schools around the world, or in his area in Egypt where he's coming from. Or another Give Me Perspective piece would be about why he flopped in Chelsea. Exactly. So you can, again, write a story with just a headline saying, he has won something, but then the whole story will still be about something else. And then Divert Me was about, this was a wonderful story I think I took from, Liverpool Echo. I think this is about a Liverpool falafel seller who was giving falafels for free every time Mo Salah scored or something like that. So that's a Divert Me story. And then another Divert Me story is about, can you actually show me a picture gallery of all wonderful murals with Mo Salah's face on it? That's another story. So it's basically, this is very quickly, I showed you 12 different options of covering the same Mo Salah story. And imagine if I've been in Nairobi on the day when South Africa, something really important happened in South Africa. I think it was decriminalization of, can't remember, won't say, but it was exactly the same situation. I got all the editors into the same room and said, give me 6 options of covering that story apart from Update Me. Because Update Me is a knee-jerk reaction for every editor. On the day when Macron won elections in France, probably out of 40 teams that we have at the BBC, 37 areas around the world probably wouldn't care that elections in France resulted in Macron winning. Let's be honest, right? If you're in Jakarta, why would you care? We as an international broadcaster are obliged to cover it. Because it's an important story, we need to explain to people why it is important. But instead of writing a story of he said, she said, percentages, reaction, all that kind of stuff, we actually did a story that Macron has become the youngest leader of France since Napoleon. And we used it in a first paragraph. And then we did a listicle on 5 other youngest leaders around the world. So we told people the story, but we actually made it more interesting to them. So that really is working for us. And another inspirational story, these are 2 kids of somebody from my team. And it's a piece which he has written for BBC News website, one of the most popular stories on the website on that day. It's about how the 2 London kids are inspired by Mo Salah's story. It is really great. And then another Inspire Me story is about, of course, his story from humble beginnings to superstardom. So this 6 user needs really revolutionize the way BBC projects itself around the world and the way we are trying to carve out niches around the world in media markets from Indonesia to Latin America. And my advice to any news organization and indeed to any other content organization would be about you only will succeed if you understand why you exist in the market and what your niche is. And you use the data, you interpret the data, take out the decisions, and then explain it to the rest of the company. So everybody pulls to the same direction. And the growth will come. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dmitry. And please welcome our final speaker to the stage, Claire Wardle.
It's so lovely to be home, I'm not going to lie. I am based in New York, and when I came through Heathrow Airport yesterday, I was like, this is like Love Actually. There were people cuddling. So it's so lovely to be back. Many people here I know, and it's great to see you. So my name's Claire Wardle. I lead First Draft. And for the last 6 months, we've been working in Brazil and also in the US, monitoring different types of information disorder. I'm going to talk about that today because many of you in this room are probably going to end up covering the EU parliamentary elections. And so I want to share with you some of the trends that we've seen in Brazil and the US, and surprise, surprise, there are many similarities, and there are many similarities that we're seeing in Europe. So I'm going to talk about those trends and talk about what that means for journalists and people who will be covering these stories. So I'm going to start with this example. This is a hat tip to my colleague Cameron Hickey, who found this. But this was circulating very widely before the midterms. I'll read out what it says. Illegal aliens are far more likely to commit federal crimes based on statistics. They are 7% of the population, yet they commit 72% of drug possession, 33% of money laundering, etc., build that wall. So I'll let that settle for a second. Those of you in the audience who are somewhere on the left of the political spectrum are probably thinking, this is a lie. Some of you in the audience from the right wing might be thinking, that sounds about true, how can I retweet that? The truth is, this is accurate. These statistics are accurate. The kicker is that word federal crimes. Most crimes in the US are state-based. If it's a federal crime, it would be drug trafficking across a border. This is a little statistical treat. You know this as a judge. You're like, of course. This is how it works. So the problem is, increasingly, the types of content that we're seeing are actually genuine but misleading. Genuine imagery but recycled. What we do with that as a society is the challenge. 2016 was not an era of 100% fabricated content of the Pope endorses Donald Trump. And deep fakes, as much as people are shouting about them, are not the worry yet. The concern is this type of content, which this is actually circulated across Europe from 2016. This is actually from Turkey. This was used to suggest that these were people from Central America trying to cross into Mexico as part of the caravan, circulated very widely. This is an example from an election day of a video that showed somebody trying to vote, and every time she went to vote, it was the wrong name. That was actually a genuine video. She did have that problem. We spoke to the polling place, and they said yes, but we gave her another chance. She voted, democracy was served. But as you can see, was shared very widely by people who wanted to push a narrative around election integrity. And here's the kind of ding, 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 disinformation bingo. Here we have two women, two people of colour, and the word communist. This is a genuine image. The only false thing about it is the word communist that was photoshopped onto that sign. Again, was shared very widely. Huge disinformation campaigns in the US aimed at women, people of colour who were running, and anybody who wasn't Christian. No surprises there. So our research in both Brazil and the US shows that this threat is not about false content. It's actually about misleading content that is designed to deepen existing divisions in society. And this won't surprise you, but I could have stood here for 24 hours giving you a drip, drip, drip of this content. It really is constant. The problem is we don't have time for a 10-year longitudinal study about what the long-term impacts are of drip, 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 drip of hyperpartisan misleading content. Maybe we'll be fine. Maybe we won't. And the problem is, we haven't got time to wait. And whilst this feels like it's potentially hyperbolic, the most effective disinformation is that which taps into our emotional responses. And lots of the conversations about information disorder ignore the big societal shifts that have happened in the last decade. The impact of the 2008 financial crisis, the collapse of the welfare state, the rise of automation. People are worried about their jobs. They're terrified about climate change. They are worried about global migration trends, and we haven't talked about it properly. Put all of that underneath the layer of information disorder, and that's why we have problems. And that's why we need to think about those societal shifts. Because the most effective disinformation is designed to reinforce your position and denigrate the other side using dog whistles, logical fallacies, and false equivalency. Problem is, if you're a platform, what on earth do you do with that? This is legal speech. There's nothing you can do about it right now, and I'd be very concerned if we started saying that we should do something about it. But what does that mean when that kind of messaging is on top of societies that are worried? They are frightened about their own safety, their own communities, and their own welfare. So the question is, how do journalists work in terms of this context? And I would argue that it's absolutely crucial that journalists understand how they fit into this context of disinformation. So I like to call this the amplification trumpet, TM. And what I want to stress here to you, those of you who are journalists, is that we need to understand where a lot of this disinformation starts. And it often starts in anonymous spaces on the web. It then moves into closed or semi-closed networks. It then moves into conspiracy communities online. It then moves into more traditional social media spaces. And then, unfortunately, sometimes it ends up on mainstream media. So you can have content that starts on Discord or 4chan that if nobody did anything with, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is it moves from that into places like Facebook Messenger, Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, into YouTube communities, Reddit forums, places like Gab, onto the mainstream outlets and then mainstream media. So let's take us back to our video from earlier. When we saw this on election day, we did the fact-checking. This was a genuine video. Somebody did struggle to vote. But then when we did our provenance checks, you probably can't see here, but the username is @FindTruthQ. Any American conspiracy theorists in the audience? If you were, you may have heard of QAnon, which is a rather large conspiracy theory. It's kind of like Pizzagate, but on steroids. And the other thing about this video is that it had actually been reposted from an Instagram video, and the username included the name Seth Rich, who was a young man who was killed. He was a DNC staffer in 2016, found murdered, huge conspiracies about him. So I thought, what's the likelihood of somebody being unable to vote who also was part of these conspiracy communities? So we did some digging. We went to Discord and found on Discord the original video that had been uploaded from an iMessage that then was being distributed through these QAnon conspiracy networks and then moved through these networks onto Twitter and Facebook and then ends up on mainstream media. Now, I'm not saying not to cover the story, but I'm saying how do you tell the story in a way that recognizes the amplification mechanisms that were pushing this? What was the purpose of ensuring that this story became part of a bigger voter election integrity storyline? So, key learnings for any of you sitting in this room. Firstly, be prepared. Train your newsrooms on how to work in a disinformation environment. I've been banging on and, in fact, training journalists for a decade on verification, but this isn't about whether or not you can find out whether this image was from today. This is about, is your newsroom prepared to wade into spaces? Does it understand how to operate a VPN? Does it have an ethical policy that says whether or not you can be in anonymous spaces? And if so, can you report on it? Do journalists understand how vulnerable they are? And that in that network of my amplification trumpet, they're the end of that trumpet. Do they know that they're at risk? Many don't. Secondly, don't act as a stenographer. Of course, I'm saying this as somebody who spends a lot of time in the US, but we see real issues with outlets repeating the lies in headlines, tweets, and Facebook post headlines. Nobody reads the 800-word fact check. All they see on Google News is the lie repeated multiple times by multiple outlets. We really have to get better at understanding how to do journalism in an age of disinformation. Here's my trumpet again. Thirdly, be responsible. Don't give disinformation additional oxygen. We talk a lot at First Draft about the tipping point. There is a moment where before the tipping point doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware. You should. As a news industry, we should be aware of those threats, but just reporting on it and doing pointing journalism, oh, that's interesting, I found it on 4chan. There's a responsibility about how we do journalism. After the tipping point, yes. The Comprova model was how do we amplify collectively to give weight to the debunks that we're doing. Fourth, be aware, understand the implications of a networked audience. So 20 years ago, if you write something in a newspaper or you put something out in the BBC News, it gets watched by Beryl and Bob. They're watching the 6 o'clock news. Bob says to Beryl, "Oh, Beryl, have you heard about QAnon?" "No, Bob. Pass the toast." Now, Bob's QAnon on Google. "Beryl, have you seen this? I told you we shouldn't be trusting those politicians. I told you that there was something to this." Now, again, I'm not saying that we don't cover this, but we have to understand the impact of the fact that our audiences are networked. And there is a way now for these what were previously very small conspiracy theories to be connected and to be connected immediately. Finally, inoculate. Do more reporting that helps explain the issues that are often subjects of disinformation campaigns. If this was a proper Google event, we'd have breakout sessions with Post-it notes. And on those Post-it notes, we could write all of the big issues that we think are going to be a problem around the EU parliamentary elections. We could do it right now. It's going to be election integrity. It's going to be immigration, and it's going to be anything that divides the EU around racial and ethnic divisions. Now, if we know that, how can we be thinking about doing reporting now so we don't, the day after Brexit, have the top search term, what's the EU? What's the equivalent that we could be doing now in preparation for the EU parliamentary elections? Because finally, it's not the robots that I'm scared of anymore. I'm actually concerned about us as human beings being made more divisive, more angry, and more prepared to actually attack one another than I am than this guy. I'll let that settle. And I will say, happy holidays! Let's go and watch Love Actually.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Claire, for finishing up our lightning talk. So a big thank you to all of our speakers, Lisa Gibbs, Daniel Bramatti, Marie-Louise Timcke, Dmitry Shishkin, and of course, Claire at the end there. I hope you found that fascinating as I have over the last hour. It's really great to have your global perspectives on all those issues. Thank you to all of the people who've come here to London. A special thank you to our partners, the European Journalism Centre and the London School of Economics and Political Science. And also a big thank you to the Google Earth Studio team for previewing your tool here. As I said, it's live right now. But here from London, it leaves me just to say to all the people watching on the live stream, thank you very much and goodbye. And we are clear. Thank you so much.